Welcome to She Said Homestead, the podcast that explores homesteading from a range of perspectives. We're Sage and Mickayla, two homesteaders, each with unique experiences, properties, and future goals for our homesteads. We're discussing various homesteading topics, sharing our personal experiences as women working full-time who are managing homesteads as well, and shining a light on the stories of other inspiring homesteaders.
Before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy our podcast, please consider leaving a review. It really helps us grow and share these homesteading stories with even more people.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am Sage from Terra Nova Acres.
And I'm Mickayla from Calico Cow Acres, and we both have homesteads in Western North Carolina.
Today, we're going to talk about how to take advantage of the season of rest, to take advantage of getting a little bit of a break in winter. But before we get into that, why don't you tell me a little bit about your week, Mickayla?
This week, I cleaned my house because I had people over, including you. We had our little second annual gingerbread party. Gingerbread Thunderdome is what we were calling it, I think, last year. And we had a handful of people over, just hung out and just decorated gingerbread houses. We went all out last year, and I fully intended to do like an even cooler one this year, and then it got to be the night of, and I was like, I don't want to make gingerbread tonight. And so everybody ended up with store-bought ones. And you know what? It was still fun. We still bought like extra candies to use, and I bought beans. So I had like a stone bean exterior on mine, and it was pretty cool. And I have a fun story to tell you about yours that I just remembered. So,
oh no.
You left yours here, right? Just so you didn't have to take it home. And we had them all sitting on the table after everybody left, and we were like hanging out and just like enjoying the rest of our night. And I walked out to the kitchen, and Ricky had just discovered that they were all up there. And you want to know what I watched him do? Like, I caught him in the act of doing it. He hopped up on the table, he like fully inspected yours, and he got like coconut all over his face. And then he stole one of your little animal cracker sheep and he ate it. Like right there. He crunched and munched the sheep all over the table. It was really funny. He knew they were a sheep.
Yeah, he got it. I did animal crackers and covered it in icing and then just kind of put coconut on it, but it looked much more like a chaotic snowball than the sheep that it was intended to be. So you really had to use your imagination to get there.
He enjoyed it. He kept trying to lick all the frosting off of them, so we had to put them all out in the laundry room, and they're still out there because he just kept trying to eat them. He kept licking all the frosting off of them, and he licked Taylor's candy canes, and yeah, it was just, he's a little gremlin, so they're all out there. But I thought you'd enjoy that, because he literally just, like, ripped the sheep off of it, because it was, like, glued on there with frosting. They just, like, crunched it all over the place. It was really funny.
When you started the story, I was convinced that it was going to end up with him peeing on it, so that's actually a better ending than what I was anticipating.
No, Moo is the one who pees on things. Ricky just eats everything. But other than that was fun. Yeah, like I cleaned my house up for that. We kind of just spent the rest of the weekend like chilling and relaxing, having a fire, like cozy Sunday. We just sat downstairs by the fire for like a few hours and like talked and had a coffee and stuff the next day to recharge our social batteries. And I ended up planting the rest of my garlic finally. Finally got around to it, which one of my chickens who gets out every day promptly destroyed. I had to redo all of it this morning before work. We got the rest of our cider, like the second fermentation, going for all of that yesterday. We're recording a day late right now because we were supposed to record yesterday, and one of my cats, more chaos, she had the zoomies, and she knocked my laptop off of whatever it was sitting on. I think it was on the table, and it landed like perfectly where the charger plugs in and snapped the head of the charger in half. And it's like it's a gaming laptop, because the software I use for work is like hardcore intensive. And so is editing software for like YouTube stuff. So I have a gaming laptop and I can't just get this charger anywhere. Like I have to order it. And like the soonest it's going to be here is Saturday. So we had to drive back to Taylor's work as soon as he got home yesterday to go get his charger from work to see if that would work. And it's not the right size, but it's the closest we could get, even if we had driven to like Spartanburg or somewhere to like Best Buy, because they don't even carry the like size of charger I need. So that was like $80 I didn't want to spend, but it should be here Saturday. And it was just absolute chaos. And then we had to go to Lowe's last night because I'm like an inch away from finishing painting my shelves, and I ran out of paint. The like $30 quartz, like tiny little cans of cabinet paint, I was like so close, and I have to do the doors, and I didn't have enough. So that was annoying. We got back at like 8:30 last night, decided we weren't going to do anything. We made dinner, and yeah, Taylor's leaving Friday for Michigan for like a handful of days, and we're trying to get a bunch of stuff in order, and it's just chaos. It's chaos.
So that's why you posted a wall of paint chips on your Instagram story. I saw that and I was like, she is not starting a new painting project. There's no way.
I saw your reaction to that, and I was like, I'm not even going to reply. I'll just tell her later. Yeah, as much as I love painting, like, I actually really enjoy painting. I do not. I need a break from it right now. Like, in my own house. If you were to tell me that you wanted to paint something in your house and you needed help, I'd be like, heck yes, change of scenery, let me paint somebody else's house, because it's fun. I love painting. I'd be down for it. But my house, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of painting in here. Like, everything's painted for now. I'm done. So, yeah.
I do need to finish painting my trim. I started that project last year and I didn't finish it. So I'm just saying there could be a trim painting party in your future. Really
Hey,
want it.
I'm down. I do enjoy painting. I'm just sick of painting in my own house. Did you ever paint your bathroom?
No, I still have the paint swatches on the wall that have been there for a while. I I started trying to figure out what I was going to do with that last year, and then I spent a bunch of money on a bunch of other projects as a homesteader does, and I was like, not priority. So, yeah, I still think about it every time I walk in there.
I was gonna say, I think that the first time I saw those was last December. I'm pretty sure they were
Sounds about
there.
right.
Just, you're taking time to think on it. It's fine.
Sure. Yeah, it's not because I have limited money.
It's because you're in your season of rest.
Yeah, at least my variation of it.
Yeah. What did you do this week?
Oh gosh. I haven't really gotten anything done homestead wise. It gets dark so early that I have time to do my rounds with the animals, collect eggs, make sure the sheep have enough hay, feed them some alfalfa, and then it's dark and cold. So really the only time to get projects done is the weekend, but I took this weekend to be social. So went to your place and had fun putting a gingerbread house together that I did not have to bake myself and didn't go crazy overboard pouring sugar to make greenhouse glass. Just did a little cute little log cabin. Just put up a bunch of pretzels as logs on the side of the house, and that's it. Also spent the next day with a friend that I haven't seen in a while. So I don't know. It's one of those weeks that I look back and I'm like, what did I do? I think I've worked and eaten and slept, and that feels like about it. But I did actually order my bee packages for next year. So that was exciting and something that kept popping up in my brain on my to-do list, and I kept forgetting. So that was anxiety inducing. It feels good to cross that off the list. And the 2 boxes for the greenhouse kit got delivered. So I have another thing to do. Yay.
Yeah, it was kind of nice to, like, not get my kitchen into like a total disaster mode before having people over, have to clean it up, and then like make a mess decorating our gingerbread house this year. It was enjoyable. Like I would do it again, but this wasn't the year for it. It was fun to just like glue candy on to a house and zone out and like just listen to everybody talking and hang out. Like it was nice.
Yeah, I think you and I have both been in the zone of like just not feeling going above and beyond right now. Like it feels good sometimes to go crazy and be creative and do this thing by hand, and then also it feels really good to just say screw it and buy a $15 gingerbread house kit at the store and and take the quote unquote shortcut. Also, something that I actually am very excited about is I got a new stove installed. I have been wanting to replace the oven stove combo that came with the house since I moved in because the oven just didn't heat evenly, and it's fine if I want to roast some vegetables. Uh, but if I want to do something sensitive like bake a cake or do fun things like that, which as a baker I get the urge to do sometimes, it would be like both burnt and somehow underdone and just like flat, just not great. Um, so I finally 3 years later have an oven that I'm excited to use, and it makes the kitchen feel kind of like a brand new kitchen. If I'm being honest, every time I walk past the kitchen, I get all giddy and I smile and I'm like, yes.
What was the first thing you made when you got it installed?
Dinner. I haven't made anything fun yet. I'm still
Oh,
very much in like struggling to keep up with normal person life. So having
that's
some good homemade fresh dinners the past couple nights has been progress. Yeah. But on to today's topic, which is the season of rest. You know, we've talked a little bit about the seasonality of homesteading. We've also talked about how both of us are not good at prioritizing rest just because there's so many things that we're excited to do and so many things that need to get done just to keep the homestead running. So it can be hard to hit pause.
Yeah, homesteading is kind of intentionally making your life more difficult, at least in some ways. So I feel like building rest into your seasonal yearly routine is very important, especially if you're not building it into like your daily or weekly routine. And I feel like, at least in my case, and I think probably your case too, the initial push of starting the homestead, like starting out on the properties where we're starting out with, where we need to like get all of these things going, hasn't really allowed much rest in general, like for literal years. At least for me. I don't know about you. Like, I would say at this point, I am pretty burnt out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am someone who is definitely familiar with burnout, and I think at least for me, there are different kinds. There's physical burnout, but then there's also emotional and intellectual burnout. And I don't know if I've ever encountered something that challenged me to the point that I was all three at one time. But that was the first couple years of homesteading for me and was very humbling, which probably means that I needed to be humbled a little bit. And it's a unique challenge. It's a unique experience, and if you're not careful, you really can take yourself past where you should reasonably go.
I think that I kind of hit that physical burnout like this summer because of just like not being able to breathe and like the intense heat and stuff. Like it just made it impossible for me to do anything outside. And then I've noticed that like trying to do projects inside, even with like medical stuff, like I've just really been struggling the last like handful of months with things. And then mental burnout with like tackling all of the stuff that we're trying to like manage with working and homestead things and YouTube and podcasts and all of the things. Like that's just been a consistent thing for a while, but it's gotten really like to the point where I cannot make all of it happen lately, like the last 2 months. So I think I went into homesteading, like we're just past the 2-year point, and I went into this knowing all of the things that we're doing. It's got to be like a short-term thing. I didn't know what that term was. Like I didn't know what short-term meant, but I think 2 years is kind of the limit of like holding, like juggling all of the things. So I've kind of let YouTube slip lately. We've stayed good with the podcast, but that's only a year in. So like that's something that we've really prioritized, and it's something that we're doing together, so it's not just on me. And the renovation stuff is wrapping up, so I'm like starting to take deep breaths a little bit about some things. Like, okay, I'm like, I can let some things slip. I can let myself rest a little. Like, it doesn't have to be so intense all of the time.
Right. I hit a very similar point 2 years in, which I'm ending my third season here. Years is a little funky, so I reference seasons, but this was my third growing season here. And at the end of the second growing season, I exactly where you just described. And I had also gone into it knowing that this was going to be a sprint. I was just going to keep my head down and do the things, but also recognizing that it had to be a short-term thing because I can't live my whole life like that. I mean, I could, but I wouldn't want to live that life. So this last season was the first time that I was really making a goal for myself, setting a goal for myself to do less or simplify more in terms of the homesteading things and trying to integrate regular life things. I don't feel like I did a great job of it. Part of that was the storm, was the hurricane, and part of that was I've been super sick this last like 6 weeks. And keeping up with a garden and sheep and chickens and bees as one person is a lot. So I set that as a goal. I wouldn't say I met my goal, but I would say that I did better than the first 2 seasons here. Progress. Not quite there.
I also feel like you had a stressful start to the season in a couple ways too. Like it wasn't just like you not not resting and not overdoing it. It was like you had to go on a work trip that stressed you out. Like it didn't go as planned. You had hail that destroyed things. Like there was a lot of stuff that happened this year that was like, just kidding, we're not gonna rest. Maybe next year.
That's true. I had forgotten about those.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you make a good point.
Let me just remind you about all the things that stressed you out.
No, give me all the excuses. It's great. I'm here for it. So I think both of us now especially are at this point where we have at least a desire to live more seasonally, and part of that is taking time in the winter to rest both physically and mentally. Because we homestead, we're going to be closer to nature. We're going to be closer to those natural rhythms. And in winter, nature rests. Trees are not productive year round. They lose their leaves and, in a sense, they hibernate over winter. Animals hibernate over winter. They eat a little bit more. They move a little slower. Some will literally hibernate. And that's just the natural pattern of things. But we as humans, myself especially, are not always great at embracing that, partially because there seems to be just such a societal pressure to be constantly productive. And particularly in the US, and particularly in strongly capitalistic societies, that's not built into the system. The system is be constantly as productive as you can, regardless of your physical or mental health.
I feel like around this time, there's always been this natural pause because it's like the end of the year, that's the holidays. Like as a kid, you had 2 weeks off of school for the holidays, the new year. And like my job currently closes down for the week of Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's, because it's just not busy anyway. And so there's just like this natural stopping point, but it's also like 3 days from us recording this. And by the time you guys are hearing this, it's going to be a month. It'll be late January. But when we're recording this, we're 3 days out from the winter solstice. So we're going to start gaining more light, which means, and at least for me, I start gaining more momentum and more energy. And I have never really before this year needed to take a break prior to the solstice. Felt the need that I needed to rest and like hibernate and do wintering before that. Like usually that comes between Christmas and New Year's and like the first week of January for me. This year I was like struggling. I've been struggling to make it through December before having this break. I'm like, I need this pause. And I think that, like you said, like the whole capitalism, the way the world works is definitely not geared towards long breaks in general for adults anyway, but especially when we should be taking breaks in the winter, when we should be kind of like turning inward and resting and being home. And something that I've noticed in the last handful of years, and specifically this past year, there are a lot of countries that do this better than the US. And I'm not like an expert on them or anything, but I've just taken note of it. I've noticed people talking about it because it's a societal cultural difference that like the US is notoriously bad for this. And I don't want to be bad at this. So the terms like, I don't know how to say this correctly, but hygge or hygge, that's been like super popular for almost a decade now. And it's like trying to describe the feeling of cozy. That's how I would describe it anyway. Holiday is like vacation for European countries. I've seen that become a more common term in like US terms. People are like, I want to take a holiday, just in general throughout the year, not just winter. And then this year in particular, I've noticed the term wintering. And I like saying that word gives me goosebumps because I just love that word so much. I don't know why. It just feels so right. It feels like I'm a bear. I'm the sleepy time tea bear. I'm going to sleep in my nightcap and nightgown with my little cup of tea, and I'm going to hibernate for the whole winter. Like, that sounds right. I don't know what about it sounds right, but it just feels good to say it.
It's interesting that you say you feel like you pick up momentum after the solstice when the days start getting longer. I feel like for me, I start to notice that my body, my mind wants to get really serious and kind of makes me, if I don't lean into it, get really serious about slowing down when the time changes. Daylight savings. I don't know if it's on or off, but it's you fall forward. Once the time changes, I'm like, oh no, my productivity is gonna fall off. And that's okay. But I've had to
Yeah,
learn to listen to that.
it's fall back. So we go back an hour. That's why we lose an hour.
Oh,
Spring forward and
yes.
fall back.
What you said.
Sorry.
What you said, not what I said. And then I don't notice that I naturally am ready to start getting busy again until the spring equinox. So from the time change, which is a little bit before the winter solstice, until like the end of March, I'm just slow. I am getting a fraction, maybe, of what I would normally get done in that time. I don't have the capacity. And again, if I don't naturally lean into it, my body does it for me by making me get sick or just my mind can't do it.
Do you think that has anything to do with like the weather? Do you think it has to do with the amount of light? Like is it like a seasonal affective disorder situation? Because I think my point of view on this completely depends where I am like on the map. Here, I feel way better, way more productive, way more excited for the new year and for like winter than I would if I lived in Michigan still.
I definitely get a little bit of that seasonal affective disorder, but to me, that is separate. This is a unique phenomenon to when I started homesteading and when I started gardening and doing all these things that are just inherently tied closer to the seasons. I mean, I've lived in the southeastern United States most of my life. I spent a little bit of time out in Colorado, so I have changed latitudes a little bit, but these past few seasons have really been the only time that I've noticed that pattern specifically.
And I mean, maybe this will change for me, like, as we get more into the flow of homesteading, because, like, this was still our second year here, and we were still doing a lot of renovation stuff, not fully focused on homestead stuff. But I think it's kind of a lingering thing where like I've always been like a planner girl. Like I love filling out my planner the week of Christmas and like getting excited for New Year's goals and just like the things that I want to accomplish in the new year, not necessarily resolutions. I've never been like a resolution person, but I always choose like my 3 words of the year, filling out my planner, like just getting excited for the new year. And I think that's why I get that motivation. And also, I've always either had the break of that Christmas week or I've taken it for myself. And so that kind of just like, that's like the biggest break I get all year, the only break I get all year really from like work or school or whatever. So that really just recharges me. Like it gets me excited to be able to focus on like just what I want to do. But I definitely think it's like a lingering thing where I have this whole life that I've lived so far built around the clock, built around dates on the calendar. And yes, the seasons are technically dates on a calendar, but I feel like the homesteading life, the life we're trying to embrace, is really like this intuitive thing that like I don't have to check the weather. I can just like look outside, be outside, and like know, okay, the weather's starting to shift towards winter. It's starting to shift towards spring. We're still kind of in that roller coaster of fall trying to tug against winter where like some days are really warm and then it drops to 20 degrees at night and the wind just like blows everything over because the cold literally rolls in and it's just this absolute roller coaster. And that happens throughout the year. And yeah, it's just like it's a different thing. Like it's a different way to experience the world. And I don't really have like a direction I'm going with this. It's just something to think about. Like it's completely different than waking up to the sunshine coming into your window is completely different than waking up to your alarm clock going off.
So when the winter season rolls around, two things happen, at least for me. So it combines, there's just less to do on the homestead to keep things moving, and also the exhaustion of the whole season before it, going kind of nonstop since pretty much March. So it's partially resting because we've crashed. we're just burnt out. And also partially there's this motivation to rest because we know that if we don't rest now and we head into the next season still being tired, still carrying that tired energy from the last season, there's no way that we're going to get through this next sprint basically of a growing season. So it's both recovery from the last season and also preparation for the next.
Yeah, I mean, we already talked about like we both knew getting into this immediately, like it can't be a long haul situation. Like you have to pause at some point, you have to put some things down at some point. And I think I've held off on putting anything down for the last 2 years, and it has to happen. I'm focusing on setting myself up well for the next season. Like I gave up on my fall garden this year and I was like, I'm just going to prepare myself for next year. As much as the rest in my mind is worth it and necessary, there are some trade-offs to it. It's very hard for me to put some things down. It's very hard for me to accept that I actually need to take the time to embrace the rest, especially doing YouTube, where I'm trying to grow my channel. I'm trying to get that as like a significant source of income to help fund more of our homestead projects, to help replace income, to help pay bills. Taking rest from projects in general means I have less to film for YouTube, on top of not wanting to film because I'm trying to rest, which means less income and less growth for my channel, which that's totally okay. There's going to be seasons like that. But I find that if I'm taking an intentional break from filming, I'm also less productive because I want to save those things to be filmed at some point. And my brain is not well trained for being bored. It does not like to be bored. I don't like to have just quiet and no activity for the most part. And so like it's used to getting those like cheap thrills of achievement where I'm like constantly like checking things off my to-do list. And that kind of ties back to like our instant gratification, delayed gratification situation episode. I don't get that when I'm not constantly doing something. So it's truly like training myself, retraining my brain to be okay with those trade-offs and to actually accept that rest is productive.
When it comes to winter on the homestead, it's not like there's nothing to do. There are still some bare bones things that we have to continue to do to keep things moving, to make sure everything's taken care of. And we might have, a few things growing in the garden. We might still have some animals. But overall, the general list of homestead maintenance tasks slows down significantly. So when you think about the bare bones tasks of your homestead in the winter, what does that get reduced to?
I think these lists are probably going to be pretty similar because we have similar situations. But for me, that looks like making sure I get the birds in the garden and letting them weed all of the beds and the pathways for me. That's something that only takes hands-on time, like 3 or 4 times. If I'm moving them around or relocating their netting, all that. That takes a few hours of my day to like move all of that, but it's not a daily thing that I'm doing. I've left them in one spot for weeks now, and they've done a great job. But that also includes moving them back off of the garden when they're done. And then on a daily basis, I need to feed and water them. And I think I mentioned a few episodes ago, like we hadn't quite figured out if the water situation was going to freeze yet. And we got into the teens, so now it has frozen, and like we've been using small waterers again. So that's a thing that has to happen in the winter that doesn't have to happen in the summer. Collecting eggs. We have first year layers, so we're still getting 6, 7, 8 eggs a day right now. And then something that has recently like been new for the first time this year that we've had to do every day, and when I say we, I mean Taylor, is splitting wood for fires because that's too dangerous for me and I will hurt myself. And then a handful of things that I thought of that like they're not daily tasks and they're not necessarily repetitive or continuous things that I have to do like weekly or anything, but stuff that we do have to make sure we get done in the winter is finishing and bottling our cider and mead, which Taylor is currently working on, like as I speak, making freezer meals so that I'm more prepared for busy spring and summer nights, and just meal prepping in general, like having a bunch of stuff in the freezer to pull out, like pastas, which I'm planning to do way more of this year, and full-on meals, ingredients, all that kind of stuff. And lastly, canning dry beans, because I do not have the time in the summer to do that, nor do I want to heat up my house more than I have to in the summer, and I very much want to heat up my house now. So I try to do that in the winter. I do the same thing with making broths and canning them. I'm going to try canning meat this year, and that's obviously like a good winter thing because I have so much produce to preserve in the summer. I don't want to deal with the things that are shelf stable or in the freezer already. Canning the tomatoes that I have in my freezer that I forgot about from my garden. And then doing things like rendering lard and just like general freezer cleanouts. So the tomatoes that I just mentioned, lard, I'm going to pull some meat out of the freezer to can, and just like seeing what's left in there that could get used up so that I can start cleaning up space in those to prepare myself and allow me to have space for when produce starts coming in 4 months from now.
It sounds so restful.
On a daily basis, it's pretty restful because it's like I could choose to do a project here and there, and like the birds really only take me like 20-30 minutes a day. So
Right. So ultimately, when we're talking about the season of rest, it's a relative term for sure. We're not trying to say that we do nothing. There are always going to be things that need to get done to keep animals healthy, or that we want to take advantage of being a little slower now so that we can keep our freaking sanity in the summer and spring when we're doing nothing but, maintaining the garden, and come in at 9 o'clock at night and really want a good dinner and don't have the energy to make it. And so pulling a freezer meal out is kind of a lifesaver.
yeah, it would be really easy to do, not easy at all, but in the winter, my mindset could be, oh, I'll just give 130% come summer, make all my food, and do the garden and all the other things. And realistically, I'm not going to succeed at that. So it does truly make a difference trying to mediate that a little bit. It's like when electric companies let you pay like a median price throughout the entire year, so your rates aren't spiking like in certain months, you know? Like you're trying to level that out. Like I'm doing a little bit of the prep for summer meals now so that I can have a little bit easier time come summer, because I know I'm about to be stressed out come May. So we do have a little bit of different setups. What are your must-do required things for wintertime homestead things?
Overall, animal maintenance changes a little bit. So when the weather's warm, i.e., when there's parasite pressure, I keep them moving. So that goes for both the sheep and the chickens. But in the winter, I don't worry about it. I just let the sheep have their free reign of the pasture, and then I'm obviously supplementing with hay because I don't have near enough land to just let them subsistence live off of the pasture. So that frees up a lot of time to not have to move the sheep once a week and the chickens twice a week. Never mind thinking about anything to do with meat chickens. In the winter, I do not have meat chickens. That is very much a summer and fall activity, so that also frees up time. I might put the animals in the garden spaces. I like giving the sheep access to the garden space because before it was my garden, it was an area for horses. And so there's a run-in shed in there, which I like them being able to go in there to get out of the cold, the wind, the rain, the snow, whatever weather we have. And they always know that they have that option if they want to. They usually choose to stay out in the weather. It really doesn't bother them, but it makes me feel better. You know, still doing normal things like making sure everybody has food and water, collecting eggs, and there might still be a few things left in the garden. Right now, I definitely have brassicas left and carrots, beets, random stuff like that. So when it dips to like below 25, then I'll go cover things with frost fabric. But it's not like I'm trying to grow tomatoes in December or anything crazy and having to do all of that extra maintenance associated with that. I could try and I would epically fail because I would not be able to keep up with it.
That's part of what makes them so special in the summer, is that it's just a summer thing. Okay, I'm curious. This question just popped into my head because I remember last year you had your chickens in your garden. Do you have your garlic protected this year from them?
Listen, I planned my fall garden around my garlic. I thought about it so much because, if you don't know, the backstory. The year previous, so 2023, when I planted my garlic, I did not think about the fact that I was going to have the sheep in there. The chickens do a little bit of damage, not too much. The sheep will straight up eat my garlic. And I put it in the section of the garden where they were going to have access to, and I tried to fence it off. Athena, when she was a puppy, messed up the fence. The sheep got into it. I lost half of my garlic harvest. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to repeat this mistake. So that was the first thing that I picked out the location for in my fall garden. And it's double fenced so that if the sheep get in there, I mean, at this point, I've tried everything. But they're double fenced and they're also under a low tunnel. So they'd really have to try.
Yeah, if they get it, they deserve it at that point.
I had to buy garlic from the store and I was like, freaking sheep, this is on you.
I would have given you some of mine, but my cat peed on half of it.
It's just seed garlic. It's just pre-fertilization, really.
It is seed garlic. It is planted now. I put some of it in the compost, but one of my chickens keeps getting out and pecking the tops off of the garlic that's like 3 inches tall now, and so I'm very frustrated with her. She also keeps making dust baths and taking all the straw off of it, so they got to stay in their run today, not in the fence. Little tangent there. Okay, so with the milder task load of winter, I'm curious what embracing the season of rest looks like for you.
I'm gonna be real honest with you guys. The only note that I wrote down for this section is just if we know. So we've said so many times before that we're just not good at this. We're truly not good at this. And I have given this question a little bit of thought since we made this general outline. And what I've come up with is that there's a difference between resting and relaxing. And ultimately, what I'm most interested in is relaxing. And I will rest to the extent that I find it relaxing. But a huge reason that I've chosen to go into the homesteading lifestyle is because I don't find sitting still and maybe the more literal definition of rest. I don't find that relaxing. I get restless, I get anxious. If my physical body isn't moving, then my mind is going 1,000 miles a minute, and that's not relaxing at all. So, honestly, I've decided that I'm more interested in investing in relaxation than I am investing in rest, or at least the literal definition of rest. And so what's relaxing for me is, maybe doing these same, we'll call it monotonous, even though I don't find it monotonous, these same monotonous homestead chores, homestead tasks, but being able to do them leisurely, not looking at my schedule, which would be a typical schedule for summer, and being like, okay, it's 5 o'clock. I have 4 hours until dark. How much stuff can I cram into this to weed as much as I can and harvest as much as I can and transplant as much as I can and start as many seeds? And I can just kind of go to the pasture without an agenda, just mosey around and be like, oh, that tree looks different. This section of the pasture looks a little different, and just kind of not have a ton in my head. That I do actually find restful in its own way.
I kind of approached this very similarly, but my brain came up with different words than yours. So instead of rest or relax, my mind went to things that like recharge me. So I think when you're saying rest, you're saying you're doing the things that you can do leisurely that kind of recharge you. Like you're able to do them without being stressed out about having to do them. And a bunch of other things. So I took that as like a recharge, but I also wrote down in all caps on our little outline, I do not know. I don't know what rest looks like for me. And I think that's because I'm learning that right now. Like I'm in the process of learning that. This winter right now, the last month or two where I've been trying to take more time for myself, more time to rest, and just say like, what would happen if the 10 things on my to-do list today don't get done? And the answer to that is usually I just move them to my to-do list for tomorrow, and then I get 3 of them done, and then the next they just keep moving and they get done eventually. That does stress me out a little bit occasionally, but sometimes it's nice to just sit in front of the fire and have tea and close my eyes. I'm learning that is enjoyable to me. This is the first winter that I would say is quote unquote going to be like normal for me, where I'm not living in a construction zone. I'm not living in a camper. I didn't just move across the country in the camper. I didn't just buy my first house that needs renovations and painting and moving in the middle of winter. And like literally 2020 winter, we lived with our friends, so still not really normal. Like we had just moved into our friend's house after moving back from North Carolina for the first time. So like that would be 4 years ago. That was like the last normal-ish winter that I had. That was like probably kind of restful, and I was still in school. And I was in grad school. So not really that restful. So yeah, like I don't know if I've ever actually had a normal, like what somebody would call like a normal winter, like even as a child. Like I don't think that I was ever not stressed out. But the thing that I've been enjoying about homesteading the last 2 years is that I'm learning that I can try things and see if I enjoy them and figure out what I as a person enjoy and what recharges me. Like I said, I've found that in the wintertime, organizing things, cleaning my house and like letting it just be clean and not instantly making a mess in here. Doing small indoor projects like making soap, candles, learning how to sew, just doing puzzles, those kinds of things really bring me so much peace. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm so excited to do this. It's like, this is something that keeps my mind busy. It keeps my hands busy, but in a very restful way. So I've really enjoyed that. And then as far as outside projects go, now that we live here where it doesn't snow 5 feet for 6 months straight, I have really found that I enjoy winter here because it's still 40 or 50 degrees outside and I can throw boots on, and yeah, it might be a little bit muddy, but I can go do things outside and like work on projects outside, and I'm not just like dying in the heat. I'm not overheating myself, but I'm also not getting frostbite, which is really nice. So I've looked forward to winter the last 2 years for the first time in my entire life. I've never liked winter. Leisurely baking, like baking Christmas cookies, is usually fun for me because it's something that I don't do often. I freeze it. I freeze most of them. We'll just snack on them throughout the whole year. And just like literally any way that I can find to use my hands in a leisurely way, that's what keeps my brain quiet. And those are some of the only things that keep my brain quiet, is like using my hands, cooking. In the summer, it's gardening, puzzles, things like that.
This might be kind of a vulnerable question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
At more of a core level for you personally, why do you think it's so difficult for you to rest, to set aside the productivity side of things and just embrace sitting still?
I have been conditioned my entire life to be like the overachiever. Like since I was in elementary school, like literally 7 years old, I was staying up till midnight every night doing homework, going to like my small private school. And like that continued throughout my entire life, pulling all-nighters in college like multiple times a week. I've just been like constantly anxious and constantly told that I need to like keep doing better. And it's just like ingrained in me. And it's something that I'm really, really, really trying to like combat. So when I say like my brain doesn't turn off unless I'm doing something with my hands, that's like I intentionally do those things because those are the only times that I don't want to say black out, but like my brain's not constantly concerned about something. With your answer for this being that you have absolutely no clue what rest looks like for you, is there a reason you don't know what rest looks like for you?
There are lots of reasons. As with anything, I think there are a lot of layers to it, but probably the strongest component to that is that I have always lived with and normalized myself to operating with a lot of anxiety. And I think that's something that's not openly perceived by other people when I move about my life. I think a lot of people close to me or not close to me, through social media or whether you're my friend who sees me every week, you wouldn't necessarily see me and my choices and say that's an anxious person. The high masking, high functioning aspect of it, I've gotten really good at, like too good at, to the point that I trick myself sometimes, and I'm like, man, what's going on? And then I'm like, oh, right, anxiety. I base my life on anxiety. That's what's happening here. So productivity is part of that. Partially because I enjoy distracting myself, because I feel like in a way I'm more regulated. My nervous system's more regulated when my brain is distracted. But that can sometimes dip into an unhealthy pattern.
My comment was just going to be that it's like reverse imposter syndrome when you're masking so well that you trick yourself.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, when I started unpacking my patterns that were maybe not so healthy a few years ago, that was one of the discoveries, and I was like, I had no idea. And then the other part of that is I feel valuable when I'm being productive. Also, I feel less valuable as a human being when I'm not producing something, and that's something that I'm working on unlearning. But man, that's hard to unlearn, especially when it's rooted in a lot of guilt and shame.
I would say that you as a person, maybe it's just because I'm aware of my own anxiety, like, to such a high degree. Like, I definitely don't get that you're an anxious person. Like, I very much agree with your statement, unless we're talking about, like, a specific thing where you're, like, trying to decide something. I can tell
Yeah.
that you're anxious about that.
Yeah, unless I'm really tired or just really off the charts dysregulated by something like a freaking hurricane. It's not obvious. But if you're close to me and one, I'm comfortable with like letting them ask down a little bit with you, or you just happen to see me in a moment where I'm just like not okay, that's when you start to see it and you're like, all right.
I also wrote down on my list, it's not something that I mentioned because I had a handful of other things that, like, they were just random thoughts on my, like, how I rest. But it kind of ties to this, and that is indulging myself in my own needs more and not, like, people pleasing, which I have always tended to do just because that's, like, part of the anxiety and, like, overachiever situation.
No, that's a huge one. Yeah, for sure.
But I feel like when I can take I think it's very tied to that, like, week between Christmas and New Year's. It's like when I can take that week and just be a couch potato or a puzzle potato, like, I can just do whatever I want and I just be in my own brain. I don't have to clock into my job or leave the house if I want to. I can just totally focus on, like, what I'm feeling in that moment, and I don't have to worry about masking for other people or worried about what they think. So I mentioned earlier that I really get into, like, the planning of the new year and the goals, and it starts to get exciting that last week of the year, the first week of the new year. I start to look forward to preparing now for the next garden season. What does that look like for you? Are you doing that prep during winter, or are you kind of in your little hibernation bubble until the equinox, like you mentioned?
I would say early winter, I'm really not doing much. I'm seed shopping and prepping a little bit because I'm kind of forced to, because I want to be able to have access to the seeds I want to have access to. So anything that is, the timeline of it is externally forced outside of myself, I will do whatever planning is necessary to accommodate that. But in general, I pretty much crash out like until maybe a couple weeks into January, and I do as little as possible. And then a couple weeks into January, I get like an ounce of momentum, and I'm like, okay, now it's time to start thinking about this other stuff. So, specifically this year, one of the big things is figuring out how on earth to prepare for lambing. And I don't know for certain that my sheep are pregnant, but I mean, I have 3 ewes and they're all intentionally exposed to this ram that I have now. And I'm hoping for lambs because I want milk, but I've also never done that before. So, with that territory comes doing a whole lot of research and educating myself and figuring out what I don't know, which figuring out what you don't know is sometimes the hardest part. It's like you can do a whole bunch of research and still not answer all the questions that need answered. So that is a whole new intimidating adventure for this winter season. And that's really honestly my top priority for preparation right now. Of course I have other things, but that's at the top of my list.
Having a crash course on something is very stressful when there are other living beings involved in that situation, especially when they're completely under solely your care. That scares me. So, like, I understand the anxiety around that.
Yeah, and I don't know, I feel like we drastically underestimate how inherently traumatic the birth process is, just in general. Like, I feel like that gets glossed over real heavily, and I'm about to have to be face to face with it, and yeah, I'm responsible for these animals, and I would feel absolutely horrible if something went wrong and they suffered unnecessarily because I was underprepared. It's the first time I'm going to do it. I'm not going to be perfectly prepared. I have to do it to learn, but I'm going to set myself and them up for as much success as I can reasonably manage. That's for sure.
I mean, yeah, researching things like that, obviously it's not hands-on, but like doing as much prep work as you can mentally and reading and whatnot, that's like the perfect winter activity, I feel like, because you can do it leisurely. It does involve reading, probably, which, you know.
And
you
YouTube
guys know
videos.
about that.
YouTube University has been great.
Yeah. I was going to say, reading, if anybody's stuck around for super long, they know we're not huge fans of that. But
Videos are good for the attention span, yes. Although I do have reading on my list for this year as well. Just I'm trying to unhate it from being forced to do it.
Did you know that there's a word, like an actual term for being avoidant of when people tell you to do something? And I was like, I need to know what this word is so I can tell.
Pathological demand avoidance. PDA.
I couldn't figure out what it was.
It's a thing.
I love that you know that already.
Well, you think I haven't hyperfixated and fell down that rabbit hole before.
You did some reading on it. Good for you.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm not just a stubborn jerk. Okay, that's cool. Good to know about myself. In your winter grand plan of planning, what is at the top of your list to focus on?
I just really, really want to set myself up well for the garden year. Like, I just don't want to have a spring where I'm trying to get things in order and also get things like seedlings started and planted in the garden, because that's been a very stressful situation the last 2 years, and yeah, I'm just not looking forward. I'm looking forward to hopefully not having 500 million things to deal with all at once in the spring. Maybe 500 million seedlings is fine, but when it's that and also having to set up like 50 beds and like all of the other things, I just don't want to do it this year. Like, I'm trying to make life easier for myself. So I'm trying, like, I want to get my greenhouse set up. I want to get my pots ready and like cleaned up a little, get the trays found, because my birds use them as feeding trays sometimes and they're just everywhere right now. Like literally just sitting out in the garden. I want to like set the greenhouse up, get the seedlings in there, get my weed fabric down so I don't have to worry about weeding pathways this year, get low tunnels set up. I don't know if I'm going to accomplish all these things, but I'm going to try. And I think even if I get a portion of those done, the like spring planting season's going to go way easier for me this year.
Yeah, I wanted you guys to set up your greenhouse first so that I could learn. I could learn from all the little things that you were like, "Oh, wish we didn't do this." But I think I might actually end up being the guinea pig for you guys because I'm also very excited to get my greenhouse up, and there's a potential, not a strong possibility, but a potential that I could get that set up in the next week and a half.
Well, first of all, I need pictures of it because I need to live vicariously through you until mine is set up, if that's the case. Because I think mine's probably going to be a month out, at least, before we get it set up. So I'm annoyed.
But you'll probably do it slow and steady in the way that it should be done. And then I'll get excited and make shortcuts and be like, whatever, I don't care. I just want it up. So taking a month might actually be the way that you should do it.
To be clear, though, the only reason it would go that way is because Taylor's helping me put it up. If it were me, I would just put it up exactly like you're doing. And it would be on the hill on a slant because I would be too excited to use it.
There's value to both. That's all I'm saying.
Are there any other things that you're doing to kind of prepare yourself for growing season, or just other projects that you're working on this winter in general?
Yeah, so my main checklist that I run through, which I might not hit all of them, it's what construction projects do I need to do, because winter's a good time to do it for one, the vegetation's kind of tame, and two, there's more free time. To try to take on a construction project in the middle of summer is just never going to work for me. So things like the greenhouse, things like the high tunnel, which I still have not tried to put together yet. But also, I ask myself, is there anything that I need to clear in terms of trees, bushes, brush? Again, the vegetation's a little tamer, but also I'm not quite as afraid of encountering a snake in the winter because I definitely live in rattlesnake and copperhead territory, and that would be no fun. So, taking down trees in winter is usually something I'll do. Previous years, I've done it on a bigger scale and been interested in trying to convert some of the wooded areas on my property into something that the sheep can actually graze from and be of higher value in that way. This year, I'm really trying to clear the shrubby slope that separates kind of my house main area from like the pasture and the food garden and the entire rest of my property. I would love to get that cleared and put fruit trees on it, fruit bushes on it, that kind of stuff. I've started that project, but it is kind of just a giant mess right now because I haven't had the opportunity to burn it because we've either been in a burn ban or it's been raining and it's wet and it's not going to do anything. So I've just kind of made a huge mess. What's new?
All right, listen, in my mind, picking up after your project is a completely separate project. So making a mess is just part of the process and it will get dealt with later. Something that is literally on my list for wintertime things that like tasks that I do for prep for the next year is picking things up I left outside in summer and I lost because the weeds took over. Taylor's also been working on clearing trees and brush now that the temperatures aren't so hot. And like you said, the snake issue is also a thing, but more so on our property, it's poison ivy. Once the poison ivy dies, he can actually get out there and like clear things and cut down trees. But he tried to do that earlier in the summer and literally like he almost had to go to the doctor because he and like get a steroid because the poison ivy was like getting so close to like his eyes and stuff on him, like the rash. It was like his entire neck looked like he got burned. Like it was so bad. So there are a lot of reasons why clearing doesn't really work in the summer. Heat is also one of them. It gets so hot here in the summer. Winter is just like a lot more enjoyable. It's usually foggy and there might be like some mist and the temperatures are cooler. It's just nicer in general. But he's been working on clearing like a bunch of the orchard edges because we're trying to get the edges cleared up to the fences that are there currently. And then we need to plant a bunch of fruit trees that we have in pots. So that is a huge undertaking for this year.
What about garden planning? At what point in the winter do you start that, or does it start before winter?
That's a weird question this year because usually I would be working on that like right now and into next week, the first week of January. Like I'd make sure I have my seed starting schedule all planned out and I would be ordering more seeds and stuff. But this year I kind of did that a little bit earlier. Like I usually will kind of decide where I want things to go in general in the beds for the next year, like at the end of garden season, so that I remember what was there this previous year. And I did do that this year. And then I ordered seeds early because I kind of got freaked out that there weren't going to be the seeds I wanted in stock because the world is chaos. And I just haven't really gotten into the seed starting stuff yet. I think I was like kind of on pause for trying to figure out what's going on with the greenhouse situation because I do want to try and start a bunch of seeds out there as far as like flowers and onions and some other stuff. I'll probably have it done. I'll probably have my like planning for the garden done before mid-January still, I would say. I'll probably work on it next week. Is that something that you plan out or do you kind of just like have your little routine that you do every year and know when to start things at this point?
It's something that I used to spend a lot of time on before I even got here. I was spending a lot of time mapping out the garden, exactly what the row orientation was going to look like, how much I could fit in each row. And part of it is building on the effort that I've already put in. So yeah, I have my master list of the general things that I grow and even separated into varieties where it makes sense. And I have my start date based on the weeks before frost, and I just kind of adjust the frost date, what I think it's going to be for that year, pretty much making sure that it falls on a weekend so that I can base my seed starting schedule on when I have the most time to get it done. But I'm also getting a lot more nonchalant with it. I'm like, I'm going to start whatever I want to start, and I'll find a place for it. And if I can't find a place for it, I'll give it away. I don't go above and beyond like I used to, figuring out exactly how much space is going to take up under my grow lights and like, okay, what do I have to make sure I transplant out before I have more room in my seed starting setup for whatever. And now that I have the greenhouse, I've really enabled myself to just go a little crazy. So that'll be especially interesting. I kind of just start what I want to start, and it works out.
Yeah, I think this year, instead of mapping out like when I need to start each thing, I'm gonna have a general idea of like, this is the latest I should start this for it to actually succeed. And then I'll probably do some experimenting like I usually do with starting things earlier and being a little more willy-nilly with it this year because I am gonna have extra space too. We're getting dangerous.
You say dangerous, I say fun. Okay, so what are the actual first seeds that you start the earliest? What do you actually start in the winter?
In the past, I haven't been able to start as many as I wanted, but flowers, a lot of like perennial or biennial flowers, I will be starting more of those outside, whether I have them in the greenhouse or not. They're going to be in like either milk cartons or the greenhouse, trying to like get things going. Poppies get started in January. Onions are going to get started in January. And then I usually start my peppers late January, early February. I would say those are all
That's
these.
early. Wow. Okay.
I like them to be big.
No, that's fair. I know that if I start my peppers too early, I'm like, oh my god, this is a jungle. But again, now that I have the greenhouse, wouldn't really be a problem.
Well, I mean,
Oh
and
man,
they're
this is gonna snowball.
and like the peppers aren't going to go out in the greenhouse right away because they don't like the cold temperatures, but I have a lot more space on my indoor starting shelves now if I have other things outside. So I have more room for my peppers and I can let them get taller because I can space the shelves out more. So yeah, greenhouse is really fixing to play into my favor.
And if you guys want to know more about what our garden planning processes look like, we will be recording and publishing that topic in next month.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of She Said Homestead. We hope you enjoyed our chat. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. Send your homesteading stories to us at shesaidhomestead@gmail.com. We can't wait to share them on the air. To stay connected, follow us on Instagram for updates and sneak peeks at what's coming up next.
If you like video podcasts, make sure you subscribe to the She Said Homestead YouTube channel too. We can't thank you enough for being part of the She Said Homestead community. Until next time, happy homesteading.